Hello, my name is Paul Rogney, and I'm the host of the Drumming News Network. In recent years, handcrafted cymbals seem to be a growing market. Rob Cook of Rebeats, author and creator of the Chicago Drum Show, believes that handcrafted cymbals are the next frontier, much like the interest in custom drum manufacturing that took place in the early 1990s. May 20th and 21st of this year at the Chicago Drum Show, you will be able to meet and experience presentations on cymbal making from each of these cymbal craftsmen, and on the 21st, a panel of all the craftsmen together. The series of interviews that I am doing are literally a discovery as it happens. I purposely did not do I hardly did any research on each of these cymbal smiths ahead of time. I've custom built drums and my own drum hardware, but the idea of cymbal crafting is something that seems part voodoo, craftsmanship, and passion. Three things that I have no interest in when it comes to actually creating a cymbal. In each of these interviews, we get to see each of their own personalities, and like a true artist, even with similar approaches, their outcomes are completely different. In this episode, I speak with Nicky Moon of NickyMoon Custom Cymbals. In addition to learning more about him and his cymbals, we talk about many of the cymbals he is making and talk a bit about how he is crafting his own cymbal alloy. This is going to be a very exciting interview, so let's get on with it.
Yeah, there you go. Nick, thank you very much for joining me on the show today. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we're talking in promotion of the Chicago Drum Show event that's coming up. We're going to be a panelist on the cymbal panel.
Yes, indeed.
I realized I doubled that up. Yeah, no, it's going to be really exciting. And I have to say, this whole new world of handcrafted cymbals is blowing my mind, and it's so exciting to see what you guys have been doing. It's such an open community, and so I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about the panel before we kind of delve into you?
The panel itself, like you mean the other cymbal smiths, or
kind of like what will people expect at the Chicago Drum Show when they see you guys?
To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure. I think everyone, the gentleman who arranged this whole thing kind of gave us free reign to do, whatever we wanted for our presentation. So I think some people will be entertaining questions more. I am going to prepare a lecture on a particular topic.
Okay.
That's kind of how I am. I like to be prepared for stuff. But I think it's just going to be a extremely informative, cymbal nerd deep dive for anybody that's
fantastic.
That's like really a cymbal fetishist is going to want to not miss this for sure.
So what will your topic be focusing on?
I'm going to discuss cymbal alloys in particular, because right now I'm in the process of developing my own new cymbal alloy. So
wow, that is going to be exciting.
Yeah. So I've learned a lot about metallurgy and all this other stuff in the past several years. So I'm gonna be talking a lot about that.
I'll definitely be there. Now, will that be on Saturday or will that be on the Sunday event? Because I know on Saturday you guys present individually, and I think on Sunday you have the big panel itself.
Okay, I don't know the schedule. I just know that it's the 20th and 21st. I forget which day my time slot is in, but I'll be there for both days. I have a booth for the show anyway, so I'll be there.
All right.
Yeah.
So maybe after the event we could follow up. I'd like to hear more about that, but I don't want to go down that road because that's going to be for the show. People, you got to go to see this panel. You got to meet these cymbal craftsmen. This is going to be fantastic.
This is going to be legit.
Yeah. So let's quickly talk about you. I want to find out about you. Like, so when did you start drumming? What got you into drumming? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm 41, going on 42 this August. I started playing drums when I was 6 years old. My parents were big music fans. They were always playing music in the house. My dad in particular is a big rock and roll guy. He had all kinds of old Zeppelin, Hendrix, and the Who records blasting in the house when I was a kid. So I mean, how can you not? It was just irresistible. It was like, what is that awesome rhythmic percussive sound? And I just became enamored with it. I started taking lessons when I was really young and did the whole high school concert band, jazz band, competitive thing. I was fortunate enough to be in a music program that was extremely competitive. So I was able to get a scholarship to go to Berkeley when I was in high school jazz band. So I went there, and then I, went on into the world of trying to be a working musician, and eventually found my way into cymbal crafting. Yeah.
Well, that's a huge jump.
It's a big jump. But here, let me try to bridge that gap a little bit. So I grew up in Boston, very close to Zildjian. right?
Oh, okay.
Where the original current Zildjian is located, and I always wanted to work there. And I tried to get a job there many times because I was always really fascinated with cymbals, but they never got back to me. So eventually I had to figure it out on my own. Yeah.
That's really cool. Just out of interest, when you were at Berkeley, did you work with any known drummers that we'd know about?
Rod
teachers?
Morgenstein was one of my teachers. Yeah.
What was that like?
He was awesome, man. Like just super awesome, nice guy, really great dude, and just a phenomenal rock and roll drummer. So, yeah, it was great.
So what kind of music do you think you like to perform the most yourself?
Rock. I'm a rock guy. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm a rock guy through and through. I mean, I listen to everything. If you looked at my Spotify or whatever, you'd be like, this guy's crazy. It's just all over the map. But yeah, rock and hard rock and metal and stuff. It's really kind of my thing. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So what kind of drums do you use, actually? Just out of interest.
I have a set of handmade drums from one of my friends named Alan Posnot, who made his company's called Woodland Percussion.
Okay.
And he made me a custom set a couple of years ago. It's just a small 4-piece birch kit.
That's cool.
Nice. Yeah. I've always played 4-piece kits. I've never been into the big 80s rack thing with toms over your head and stuff. Like, yeah, I'm real basic. Hi-hats, crash, ride, tom, snare, and kick drum. That's it.
If you saw my drum sets, you'd freak out because I grew up in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, nothing against it, man. It's just, I don't know what to do. I get anxiety when I sit behind kits like that. I'm like, I gotta hit everything, I need to limit my options. Yeah.
It's metal.
It's totally.
How can you be metal when you got a 4-piece set? I mean, come on.
I know. It doesn't make sense.
So early on, who were some of your influences that kind of inspired you?
So as a child, I was born in 81.
Mm-hmm.
So I really started getting into music, probably in like the late 80s, early 90s. So really I'm a child of the 90s, if you think about it, which was like, in my opinion, the best music decade. There was that whole alternative boom with Nirvana, so Dave Grohl and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. Sean Kinney was a big influence. Vinnie Paul, Pantera, the whole 90s metal scene, Igor Cavalera, Sepultura. And my drum teacher when I was a kid was a big Buddy Rich guy. He was playing with the remaining members of the Buddy Rich big band, so he was like real into Buddy Rich. So I listened to a lot of Buddy. Yeah, I mean, those are pretty much the ones that stand out,
So who are you listening to now that kind of you're interested in listening to that maybe is an inspiration?
As a drummer or just his music?
A drummer, specifically.
A drummer. My good friend Mike Dawson is probably my favorite current drummer.
Okay.
Yeah, he's just a super interesting human being, but just the way he approaches the craft of drumming is fascinating to me. He tries to attack it from every angle, like he doesn't want to leave any stones unturned. Mm-hmm. And I really, really respect that. So I love listening to him play.
That's fantastic.
Kind of unpacking that whole thing. Yeah. I'll give you another one too. This is kind of a lesser known dude, but this guy named Joe Tomino, he played with this group called Dub Trio. They're from Brooklyn. They're like a 3-piece punk / dub reggae group. And one of the most interesting bands I've ever heard in my life. But he's like playing with one hand, and on the other hand, he's like fiddling with digital effects and putting like delays on his cymbals and stuff like that. Just a real out there phenomenal dude. So yeah, it's another guy that I find really fascinating these days.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
When I was a kid listening to music, I got inspired by the sounds that I heard on the radio and the bands I liked.
Yeah.
And that drew me to a specific brand of cymbals. Yes. What were you listening to that really kind of piqued your interest for cymbals? Was it the music, or was it going to the store, or jazz people, or what was it that really piqued your interest in wanting to define a cymbal sound?
That's a great question. I'm still trying to figure that out. Something about the way cymbals look, to be perfectly honest with you, it always captivated me. I always thought they were just beautiful. There's something really mysterious and kind of magical about them. They're gold, and it was always like very secretive, like how they were made. Like back in the day, now it's way more out there. But like when we were kids, like you had no idea how these things came to be. I remember the first time I got like really nice cymbals that I wanted was some Sabian AAX cymbals. And I just remember looking at them and just being like, just captivated, just blew me away. Like I was so curious, how does this thing get made? That's really what drew me to it, to be honest with you. Yeah.
I have to say, one of the first cymbal that I looked at when we were talking about Sabian was a different type of cymbal. They're the first company I think I can remember introducing a more natural, earthy tone cymbal with their Leopard series. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I remember that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I thought that always drew my attention.
Yep,
So
that was pretty gnarly. Yeah.
But it's such an easy thing to say, okay, I kind of got into cymbal making, but it's such an intricate I mean, I work with engineering and metals and that kind of stuff, but cymbals is part voodoo and part craftsman and part a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
How did you develop the ability to craft a cymbal from an interest, like wanting to work at Zildjian and say, okay, well, I'm going to do it myself. It's not like building a drum, I mean, it's like completely different.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
The beginning stages was all trial and error because there was no book, there was no manual, there was nothing to go by. So, it was just taking existing cymbals and just experimenting with them, hitting them with hammers and grinding them and scraping them and drilling them with holes and just doing whatever you could to alter it in whatever way, you could. That was really how it all started, you know, and then through the wonders of the internet, I mean, I started experimenting in like 2011. And I think it wasn't until like 2016 that I got wise to like YouTube and all that stuff. And then I found the website of this guy named Craig Lauritsen, who's one of the original independent cymbal smiths. And he's in Australia. And I found his website, and it was the first place that had any kind of information about cymbal making, like how to make the tools and how to do it or whatever. And I was like blown away, like just wow. That piqued my interest so hard. And then from there, I just was like all in.
That's fantastic. So would he mentor you at all or not?
But we are friends now. We've talked, we FaceTime and stuff. But I eventually got in touch with Heather Stein, who was a cymbal smith out in California. She was a student of Matt Bettis, who's another one of the original independent guys. She invited me to go out there for a couple of days. So she taught me a little bit about lathing and hand hammering. And then I came back and was working on my own again. So I got the attention of this guy, Francisco Domene in Brazil, online, and he invited me to go to Brazil, and where I went, and he was like building his own factory at the time, and he taught me a lot, and that was kind of what really that was the gas to the fire.
Wow. So, I mean,
and after that, I went back there a second time, and then I went over to Turkey, to Istanbul and to Samsun, Turkey. I visited a couple of different factories there. So I've been all around, gotten the whole full world tour.
That's amazing. So what's the difference between a Brazilian cymbal versus a Turkish cymbal?
Nothing.
So is it
nothing?
Is Turkey supplying the raw cymbal to like Brazil, or does he make them?
No. So Mustafa Deril, who's in Samsun, Turkey, flew to Brazil to teach Francisco how to make, that kind of B20. So he's doing very much the same process. It's just in a different country, but it's the same deal.
Are you doing that? Are you making your own materials?
I'm starting to, yeah.
Wow, that is such a whole different world.
It's a huge learning curve. It's going to take me years to get it right, but I'm starting now and have done some experiments, and it's, yeah.
Well, the only cymbal alloy I can think of that was specifically created for sound in recent years is the Paiste alloy.
Right.
And it took them years to do it, and what are you trying to achieve with the tone you're trying to go after? Or at this point, is it more of a discovery of learning about that?
Good question. I'm a big believer in individualism and like trying to find your own like sort of unique path. So the way that I'm doing the process is different than the way Zildjian or the Turkish factories or Paiste or anybody has done it before. It's a whole different thing. Okay. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but that's really what's exciting about it,
Oh, definitely. That's the sense of discovery and again, finding something more unique is really cool. I studied duplex metals for a while, and that was primarily for ability to manufacture materials for, engineering, acid resistance.
Yeah,
and,
very cool.
Those kinds of things. Have you looked into that kind of thing yet and looked how different elements and more of one ingredient into it can actually make a modification?
Oh yeah, I've spent a couple hours every night after the day on Google Scholar or on, different university websites or whatever, just looking through any information I could find about metal, anything, and just trying to deduce like, okay, let me just take whatever information I can and sort of, take what I need and throw away the rest. So, yeah, I've studied anything that has to do with metal.
I suppose we better stop there when it comes to diving in, because that's kind of what you're going to be talking about. And I don't want to ruin what people are going to see at the show.
That's fine. Yeah, there's plenty to talk about. Yeah, that's fine.
No, because there's such a difference between bronzes and also how they work together.
There sure is.
I notice how like depending on the brand you get, you can get the exact same cymbal and it sounds completely different. And it's kind of the balancing of elements. Have you, just out of interest, have you gotten to the point of learning how do companies balance their elements so they're consistent versus kind of like a
I mean, I could answer that. It would take an hour, but I'll try to cut it down to 2 minutes. There's very different manufacturing processes. Like cymbal alloys, say it's the same exact contents of materials, right? Same amount of copper, same amount of tin. Doesn't mean that like person A and person B are going to prepare it the same way. And every little difference in their step of how they make that metal has a huge impact on the resulting, tonality and performance of the metal. So like a company like Peisty, the way that they get their bronze, they don't melt their own metal. They get theirs from like an industrial supplier who melts it in larger quantities than companies like Zildjian or whatever else. That lends itself to consistency. There's, the purity of the raw material lends itself to consistency. There's just like a bazillion factors, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. How often do you maintenance your equipment in your shop? How do you clean the rolling mill, or is it dirty? Like stuff, every little tiny thing has an impact,
So like, let's say in one of your lines, because you have several lines, I'm kind of blown away by what you offer for being a hand craftsman. Consistently, do you have a consistent sound with every cymbal that's a model and a size?
Yes, I mean as close as I can get it.
It's interesting. Like one thing, and I'm not saying anything bad about Zildjian, because this is what a lot of people loved about Zildjian, is that sometimes they get an amazing sounding cymbal, and they'd hope they'd never ever lose it, but it could be the exact same model, and it wouldn't have that same kind of sound.
Right.
I don't think they're that way anymore, but they were. That's kind of what made the 70s and 80s, and that's what made those so special. Do you see a benefit to that at all?
That's a great point. So the whole deal with the way that they produce cymbals, their goal is to be the most consistent. So they're trying to target their manufacturing process to achieve consistency, but it actually has the opposite effect, because they're not thinking about the bronze itself. They're just thinking, okay, we have to make our manufacturing steps consistent. But every blank that you start with, every ingot has its own personality. So if you don't treat it as an individual and then try to control the outcome, then you're not going to get the same outcome. If you treat it all, it's like if you had 3 kids and you raise them all the same, it's like expecting them all to turn out the same. As opposed to if you had 3 different personalities, you want them all to turn out to be good kids. Well, you have to treat them each differently. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Dude, that's amazing. Yeah, I never even thought of it that way. So there can be a lot of variance in ingots. Now, comparing that to a drum sound, where I think more people have a familiarity with that, is like, you got to hit the tone of the drum to get the actual note out of it, to out of the shell, to get an idea to find that. How do you test an ingot to find out where his properties are going to be so you can mold it into the sound you want?
You have to continually play it throughout the process.
Okay.
Which is not, that doesn't lend itself well to mass manufacturing, because they're not going to stop at every step and analyze each individual thing. They're making 2,000 cymbals a day or whatever. You know what I mean? That's the real advantage of somebody like me doing an individual craftsman experience, is because the sound is in here. It's not the settings on my equipment. It's up here. I know how to get there. Okay. That's really where the difference lies.
It's amazing. So can somebody just come to you and say, I like what you're offering, but I actually want to have my own sound. I want to create something that's unique to me. Can they do that?
Yeah, that's what I do probably 90% of the time.
Oh, okay.
People will say, "Hey, I love, the cymbal you made for so and so. It's really cool, but I want something that crashes a little bit more, or I want the bell to pop a little bit more. Can we do that?" Yeah, of course. That's why it's NickyMoon Custom Cymbals, not NickyMoon Cymbals. That's the whole deal. Because when I was a younger drummer, I wanted this service. I wanted to be able to go ask for these things, and it wasn't there.
Mhm.
So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make it available. That's what I'm doing.
Just out of interest, the first time I ever heard about people crafting a cymbal type instrument, I'll call it, is it were gongs. There's a big movement in people crafting their own gongs. Do you think you'd ever be getting into that?
I've had people ask me. I made one gong for my buddy JD, but it's not really my jam.
Mm-hmm.
I was never really interested in them.
Okay.
I never got super into the weird stuff like the gongs or the super freaky cymbals. I just like regular like cymbals.
Okay.
It's kind of my thing. So I just try to stay in my lane. Who knows? I mean, I might get there someday.
Well, yeah, but you look at it. Now I'm doing a little speculation here,
Sure.
but my assumption is when I've looked at some of these cymbals, they look a little bit thinner. Are you ever crafting or planning to craft a cymbal that would actually have longevity to it if you got a hard hitter?
If the drummer's a hard hitter, yeah, I'm going to take into consideration whoever the player is.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody comes to me to place an order, I'm going to ask them a series of questions like, what kind of sticks do you play? How big are you? How much do you weigh? What kind of music do you play? What's your style? All that stuff is going to give me, intel as to how do I make the cymbal to make sure it's going to withstand what this person's doing with it. If somebody asks me for something that doesn't really make sense because they think they want something, but I know better, I'm going to tell them that.
Okay.
That, hey, you're making a bad decision. You should take my suggestion. And then it's on them, whatever they want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fantastic though.
But I mean, that's what you're paying me for, right? Like, I mean, this is my life's work. Like, if you wanted just a run of the mill thing, just go to the Guitar Center and get it. But like, if you're coming to a guy like me, like you're paying me for my experience and for my knowledge, so I'm going to give it to you.
What kind of consistency do you see in the customer who is wanting to buy a cymbal from you?
I mean, most of them are awesome. Like I have really great clients. I'm really grateful for it. Every now and then you get somebody who's a little bit out there and super demanding and has kind of unrealistic expectations. But for the most part, people are really wonderful.
Oh, that's good.
They're very appreciative of the amount of work that goes into it, and they're just appreciative of the fact that they can actually get what they really want. Because that's kind of a new thing.
Because defining the tone of a cymbal would be hard.
It's really hard. Everybody's got different words for it too. Like you might say dark, and like that means something different to me than it does to you. So I got to be like, okay, what do you mean by dark? Like, give me an example of dark. And then they'll say, hey, this symbol or that symbol. I go, okay, now I know what you're talking about. Because like words are just words. I don't know what's in somebody's head.
Well, for curing of cymbals too, just out of interest, there's a guy who I talked with. I kind of knew he's George Lynch. He's a guitarist.
Yeah,
and he makes a lot. And he makes a lot of his parts, but he buries the parts in the ground, right? So to force an oxidation and pull specific elements towards the surface of the metal. Is there a benefit to something like that with cymbals? Is that something that would actually?
Yeah, so I actually did that a couple of years ago. I went on, I did a special series when I released this new line called the Old World Cymbals. I went out and buried a batch of 10 cymbals in my backyard and left them there for 2.5 months. Basically what's going to happen is the acid in the soil is going to react with the metal, right? And it's going to create, depending on the conditions of the cymbal itself when it goes into the ground, depends on the reaction you're going to get. So like if you took like an off the shelf cymbal and you buried it, nothing's going to happen because it has like a lacquer coating on it. That has to be, like stripped off for that reaction to occur. But so there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it certainly does lend itself to something cool. There's a vibe to it, definitely.
Do your cymbals have a lacquer coating on them?
No, I don't do. The only time I do that is if I'm doing a chemical patina, then I will sometimes clear seal it depending on what the customer is looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also with a brand that came out quite a few years ago, one of the bigger brands, when you touch a cymbal, you'd always get your fingers marks on them. You could never get the finger marks off.
Yeah.
So is that something that a lot of handcrafted cymbals are like, or is there a way to
There's nothing you can do about that, unfortunately. I spent a couple of years because I kind of have like low level OCD with like stuff visually. And I was like going nuts trying to make everything look like perfect. It has to be perfect, you know? And I realized like with bronze, like it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Like as soon as the metal is exposed to the air, it starts reacting.
Okay.
There's nothing you can do about that, you know? And even if you coat it with something, still there's the opportunity for a reaction to take place. So it's something I fought for a while. I had to really like figure out what not to do to make it worse, but it's not something you can completely ever control.
How does the like a lacquering process or a wax process impact the overall sound? Have you experimented with that and actually heard for yourself the difference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You can actually use it to your advantage. If somebody wants like a really dry, super dry cymbal, you can like really up the amount of coating that goes on the cymbal, and that's going to restrict the vibration of it a little bit, you know?
Okay.
It does restrict the vibration. If you're just using a tiny little bit, to the untrained ear, you're probably not going to notice.
Okay.
You know, but yeah, it does have an effect.
Just sort of an interest. I mean, and I'm not asking for trade secrets. If you can't go there, don't tell me. But, what is a cymbal lacquer? Because I think of a lacquer as like a polyacrylic urethane, or you know what I mean.
It's actually it depends on the company. Okay. You know, there's not like one. There's no anything on the market designed for cymbals. There's no tools designed to make cymbals. There's no lacquer designed for cymbals. Like it's all stuff that's been adapted to make cymbals.
Okay.
You know, it's not a big enough market for there to be like really specialized products, really. There's a couple cymbal polishes and stuff, but it's just repurposed like metal polish for the most part. So there certain companies will use a water-based thing. Some companies will use a resin-based thing. It depends. Yeah.
Okay. And in the cymbal making process, I'm envisioning that you'd have a series of dies that would give you the basic form. And then from there, you often do a lathing technique. Is that the case at all or not?
That's the case at a company like Zildjian or Sabian, but there's no basic form going on. When I get a blank, it looks like a corn chip. I mean, it's completely out of whack. The whole shape is formed by hand hammering. The entire shaping process.
Now, is that like a series of dies you have, or is that something you just?
No, that's me holding the cymbal in my hands, holding a hammer, and then putting it over an anvil and pounding it.
Wow.
You know, into shape. That's how the shape gets there.
That's
there's
amazing.
no preforming or anything like that.
Your cymbals are beautiful. Sorry, I'm just looking at them quickly. I mean, like,
oh yeah,
I can't. I'm just like, wow, I can't imagine hand hammering a piece of metal like that.
Yeah, so, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
So the lathing process, I'm envisioning, you know, you got a 20 to 20 inch or larger and smaller, but big, cycling at a high rate of speed. What's that like to work with? I mean, I'm assuming there's got to be, if the cymbal's not balanced, you're going to get a harmonic vibration. And
absolutely, yeah. Chatter's a big thing. Lathing is the most dangerous process in making a cymbal. You know, some people have gotten seriously injured, you know, doing it. You got to be really, really careful. You're spinning a giant piece of metal, and when you lay the cymbal, the edges get extremely sharp. So it's like, if you get your finger anywhere near that, like your finger's gone, man.
Wow.
See you later. Like you got to be really careful. One of the cymbal smiths, like his lathe wasn't maintenance properly, and the faceplate came off, and the thing like flew at, you know, and like it's like really dangerous. So it's definitely adrenaline. You know, you got to make sure you're keeping your gear like properly maintained and everything. And then hot shavings are flying off of it, you know, and then there's the metal particles, the dust too, which as far as your lungs go, it's carcinogenic. So you have to, you know, wear a respirator and a mask and everything else. It's not a safe occupation by any stretch. Nothing about it.
And you enjoy this for why?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I have no idea, because I guess my parents dropped me when I was little or something. I have no idea, man.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, how do you develop a series of cymbal? I guess not going too deep, but how do you come up with the consistency of tonality? Is it through thickness? Is it through a consistency in the bell? If you're not using forms, how do you do that? I know I set us all up here, but it's more than that. You know, you got
certainly
the bold cymbal and.
What do I want it to sound like? It's experience, really, because the first several years of making cymbals, you're just figuring out what not to do. You know, And then what happens when you do certain things. And then over time, you realize, okay, if I do this and I don't do that, I'm going to get this result fairly predictably, right? There might be some variation in it, but fairly predictably. Bell shapes all come into play. Thickness of the bell, the thickness of the bow, the taper of the cymbal, the shape is the biggest factor. Like where does it curve and how big is the curve? Where does the curve end? That's the biggest factor.
Okay.
And then the surface finish, so when you combine all those elements together and what happens when you combine this surface finish with that shape bell, this taper, this thickness, that's when you can say comfortably, okay, now I can predict what the outcome is going to be.
Wow.
There's
amazing.
no way to get to that point without just grinding and doing your work, like and doing your reps and getting your experience, and then you'll figure it out. There's no shortcut to that. You can't read that in a book.
Right. Well, how many cymbals do you make a month? Is it just you?
Not
doing
as
it?
many as you would think. It's just me though. So the amount of busy work that goes into running a business like this, it's way more time doing other stuff than I feel like I never make cymbals. I'm always like online, doing social media. I'm always maintaining my gear. Your equipment always breaks. You're fixing your electrical stuff. You're tweaking your website. You're going to trade shows. So, you're doing a million jobs. That's really the trick of being a one-man shop.
But on top of it, aren't you also offering education just so people can make their own cymbals?
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have 2 of those coming up this month. I don't know. I just again, it was something that I wish had been available when I wanted to learn. And it wasn't available. I had to go to Brazil. I had to go to Turkey. Like it was, so I thought, well, I can do this now. Like I have a place where I can do this for people. So why not do it? So
what's the experience a student will have?
So I've taken people that had some cymbal making experience in here, they'd already been started. I've had people that were brand new to it. And each of those people after the second day was making something half decent,
Wow. And how long is the class for?
I can do it anywhere from 1 day up to 4 days. So
Okay.
I suggest people take, the 3 to 4 day option because this is not something that you can pick up in a day. Like 4 days is just barely scratching the surface, So
essentially they come in and they can leave with a handcrafted cymbal that they made themselves.
They'll leave with, so if you do the 4 day camp, you're leaving with 8 cymbals that you made yourself.
8. Wow.
8.
What sizes? Just out of interest.
I usually do like 2 rides, a few crashes, and some hi-hats. Just give them like a full complete set, basically.
Wow. And then what does
because I want people to I'm sorry. I want people to be able to know how to make, a ride, a crash, a hi-hat, because they're different.
What does it cost for like a class, like 4 day class like that?
Off the top of my head, I think it's like around 2,300 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many of those do you do a year?
I just started doing it last summer. So I did 3 last summer and I have done 3 this year, and I have a few more coming up, and hopefully we'll have more this summer. So
that's so cool.
It's a new thing, but it's something that I want to keep developing, like as I'm working on my workshop downstairs, I'm developing it with like the Cymbal Academy in mind, like how can I grow this thing? Cause I want to have 10 kids in here, next year instead of 2 at a time.
That's what I got to say is so exciting about this community. And people probably hear this in some of the other interviews I've done, but when I talk to you craftsmen, you guys really are supportive of one another and the craft of cymbal making compared to boutique drum manufacturing. It just seems like there's a lot more competition there, unwillingness to work together.
I mean, we'll get to that point when the competition gets to be too rough.
Okay.
This is still, I mean, of course, because this is still fairly new, I hope not, but competition always tends to drive people apart a little bit. But this is such a freak passion. It's such a Hail Mary, like psycho thing to get into that like we've had no choice but to like latch onto each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really like that kind of thing. It takes over your life if you really want to do it. It's a lifestyle choice. It's like a commitment. So people that are into it understand that someone else that's really into it, like you have that bond right off the bat.
Well, the way I'm envisioning this is that it could really impact the cymbal industry.
Oh, it is. It's changed. It's changing.
Are you able to calculate at all what the handcrafted cymbal is market share right now?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I would have to sit down and do a lot of math, and I hate math, but we have certainly taken a big bite now collectively out of both the Turkish manufacturers and the North American manufacturers, which they're not happy about.
I can imagine.
And they're striking back. Like,
how?
They're trying. Oh, look at their marketing, man.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing all these. All of a sudden, everything that was secretive, they would never show you back in the day. They're like, "Hey, here's Steve. He works in the hammering department." You know, like all their social media posts. It's just all like this, like, "Hey, we're down to earth too." It's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're not fooling anybody, dude. You're so transparent. But like, sure, you know.
So, what do you think? People are just a real easy, definitive way to explain it from your point of view. What do you feel that people are getting with a craftsman like you versus a larger manufacturer?
You're getting time on cymbal. Like, it's not just one of a batch that's just getting pumped out. It's like your request is going in here, going through here, and like back to you. You get me. You have access to me. You know, like, when do you get to call Zildjian and like talk to the guy making your cymbal? No,
of
course not. You know, that's what you get.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking of, like, it seems like there's so many more players that are trying to do exploratory sounds. Do you see a shift in people's interests of what kind of sounds they're looking for?
Absolutely. It's changed. There was like the dark and dry thing. That was like a big thing. That's starting to change now. And people are like sort of coming back. And I sort of saw this coming back into like the more vintage A kind of sound, a little bit brighter stuff is like kind of coming back.
Yeah.
If you've been playing drums for any extended period of time, trends tend to swing hard. So like, remember the long bass drums?
Oh yeah, I love those, by the way.
Yeah, they were super cool. They looked awesome. And now what's happened? Now you get the pancake bass drums.
Exactly.
Right. And then it's going to swing back and it'll swing back and it'll swing back. So like the same thing with the cymbals. They went to like people playing 30-inch ride cymbals, extra thin, and like that'll go back to 18-inch heavy rides, like that stuff's always going to kind of ebb and flow. And as a maker, I never wanted to pigeonhole myself into like, I can only do old Ks. Like, no, I want to make cymbals, man. Like the whole thing. I want to do all of it.
What's the most popular size currently of like a crash, a ride, and then hi-hats?
Hi-hats, I would say 15. A crash, that's tough because people don't buy a lot of crashes. People buy rides that they like to use as crashes. So I would say probably 19, 20. And for rides, between 20 and 22. Yeah.
Is it 24 just too much, you think?
For me, yeah. I think so. For the right person, no, it's not too, like for John Bonham, it wasn't, like, you know what I mean? 26, 28, I think is preposterous. Like, I don't think anybody needs a cymbal that big, but again, who am I? Like, if you're going to make art with it, go right ahead.
Right.
Who am I to tell you can't?
Right. Well, I talked to some people who are using, it's odd to me how for a while, like you said, with trends, hi-hats were getting so small. You had the micro hats. You had these,
like 6-inch hi-hats.
Well, yeah, and now they got not, I shouldn't say now. Actually, this phase is actually ended now too, I think. But people were going up to like 18 and 20-inch hi-hats.
Yeah, that's kind of tapered off too.
But it's like, I was shocked because the biggest pair I ever heard was Steve Jordan. I think he had a pair of 19-inch. 17? I thought it was 19.
Maybe it was 19. Okay, yeah, it was like two crash cymbals that he put together.
Yeah, but they were slightly, weren't they different because they were tapered differently to act like a hi-hat, or was it just two crashes?
It was two crashes, but one of them was thinner and the other one was like a heavier crash.
Okay.
I believe so. I think that's what it was. Yeah.
And from what I heard is that people loved them, that they sounded amazing. But again, that could be his finesse. So,
well, yeah, you got to take into consideration who's playing them, right?
Yeah. For sure. Well, that's just amazing. So, can you talk a little bit more about the community? Because what I'm excited about is, I feel like we're at the forefront of a whole new world of cymbal craftsmanship, and it's going to push manufacturers like the drumming community. Like, I'll back up a little bit. Sorry, before I go down the road. When I was a kid, I used to get Modern Drummer, and in the 80s, most companies were promoting how strong their drum shell was. So they give this big heavy guy to stand on the diameter side of the shell to see if it would crush. And then it went to DW, who came out. They came out with the thinner ply reinforcement rings, who kind of invigorated the whole classic drum sound. And
Right.
that's where I first saw the quality of craftsmanship start to impact larger companies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just out of a point of interest, because I've been doing a lot with this lately. I used to work at Rims Percussion, and as first endorsed with them, started working with them, and then I started doing artist relations. And one year we had to do an AM, and what we were going to do is they just purchased a sound booth at the time, and what they did was request two of the exact same sizes, 12-inch by 10 by 12-inch toms from each manufacturer. There's big manufacturers, like 10 or 15 manufacturers we got these from. So we had like 30 drums or whatever. And one would have a rims mount, and the other one would just have the mount of the manufacturer. So you could actually hear the difference between rims, is it real or not?
Yeah.
And that was back in 88, 89. This is before DW really started really having a market share. And I'm not joking, 100% of them were garbage. We had to send all of them out to get them re-edged because we could
Wow.
not tune them in. And I was
Wow.
shocked, except for the DW. That was the only one that sounded good. And at that time, they were using Keller shells. So it's
Right.
like, all they were doing is putting a little bit more craftsmanship into
Right.
the manufacturing of a drum. And so that one company, in my opinion, really sparked the excitement for people to say, or the reaction of companies saying, hey, we really got to change our game here. How long do you think that'll be until that happens with the cymbal making world? Like where they're going to actually have maybe more series that are handcrafted from beginning to end?
I mean, it's happening. Like that's why Mino is Mino.
Okay.
So like Mino came sort of out of nowhere, like as far as like being a major cymbal player.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have YouTube videos of like the whole story behind that. Like, I know the guys in Turkey that started that whole revolution, that started Mino. Like, it's a big story, but
Oh, can you just talk about that quickly?
yeah. So the Duril family, they're in Samsun, Turkey. There's several cousins and brothers that all make cymbals. They go back to the original Istanbul company. They were students of uh the two masters at Istanbul who worked for Mikhail Zildjian at the original K Zildjian factory. So it's all just like funneling down from there.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys went to Roland Mino and said, hey, you should make, handcrafted B20 cymbals. We can do it. Because Mino was just making like CNC B8 stuff at the time. And they were like, okay, yeah, you know what? These are awesome. Let's do this. And that was the start of Byzance. And that's like the line that launched Mino into like huge popularity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that brought the handcraft, dry, dark, dirty, handcrafted thing back into like fashion. Really,
Okay.
that was it. That was what did it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they craft their cymbals now?
Mino?
Mine, yeah.
They have a partnership with Adnan Daril, with one of them. They have a factory called Amisos, and it's in Samsun, Turkey. I saw it with my own two eyes out there. And so it's still Turkish guys that are like in charge out there, but they have a couple of the German dudes probably doing QC out there too.
Okay.
It's like kind of a blending of the two cultures.
It's fascinating to find out that like certain lines for every manufacturer might be supplied from Turkey. Might just be one.
Well, originally they were just supplied from there, but now they kind of like joined, and opened up their own like sort of joint operation thing. But that was sort of like really what brought the whole thing back into vogue, because they got Mino had their money, and these Turkish guys had their skills. And like when you put those things together, marketing and skills, like of course you're gonna get Benny Greb and Annika Nillis and all these hot drummers to start toting your stuff, and then it was just on from there, which really blew the doors open for people like me, because it was like, okay, well, if you like that level of handcraft, like how about one person?
Yeah, exactly. Totally. So let's talk a little bit about where you're expecting to go with this. I mean, what are your short-term goals and your like 5-year plan, just out of interest?
Short-term goals, I guess, are now to continue developing the alloy that I'm working on. That was something very early on that I knew that I always wanted to do if I ever had the ability to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like, I have the property, I have the space and everything to be able to explore that, which is great. So that's where I'm focused currently.
Okay.
But as far as the 5-year plan, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I just want to keep, my incremental growth and to keep working my way up. I don't know that I ever want to be a giant factory operation, because then I'm going to lose the very thing that, makes me what I am.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is like a sort of a middle ground, maybe, to still maintaining the individual handcrafted thing, but being able to bring it to a little bit of a larger audience. I don't know. Like, I mean, that was always kind of the goal, but as time goes on, sometimes I'm like really happy with just continuing on the way that I am right now, which is just having like one-on-one relationships with drummers and like really being able to talk to people. Like, if I lose that, I might be bummed out.
Oh, definitely. That's what makes it special.
Yeah.
Talking about though expansion and growth and you wanting to create your own alloy, let's talk a little bit about costs. I mean, right now it's really interesting how the cost of materials and precious metal taxes and import taxes are really impacting manufacturers. As I understand it, it's more aluminum than maybe brass and bronze. But what is the impact
No.
seen? It isn't okay.
No, it's monstrous. We're all suffering terribly right now.
Okay.
Tin is the problem in particular.
Oh, really? Okay.
And tin is bronze is copper and tin. So it's exorbitant. If you look at the London Metal Exchange and you look at how the prices have gone up since COVID, it's shocking. I mean, it's more than doubled, and people are not willing to pay more than double for a cymbal, that they did a few years ago. So like, we have to eat some of that, which sucks,
Well, I know that I look at these big manufacturers, and right now what's kind of going on and looking at the fluctuations of costs. It's been really interesting to see that at least to this point, most larger manufacturers have kept that price where it was even a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But like with aluminum costs, they've gone up about 7 times in the last year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And they're eating all those costs. So what's that going to be? What's that going to look like to the drumming community in the next few years? Are they going to downscale, or what are they going to do to be able to mitigate those costs and not price themselves out of a customer base?
Well, you said a couple interesting things. What did you say right before that?
I forgot.
Now I'm having my brain fart.
No, I was specifically talking about how
you're talking about aluminum,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, specifically aluminum's gone up like 7 times. And then
okay. The larger companies. So the way that larger companies buy metal and the way that people like me buy metal is way different. A larger company goes to like a country and is like, hey, government of this country, like, we want to buy a huge amount. So you set the price for a year. We're going to pay this much for the next year or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that price doesn't change. I don't have that ability. They raise the price for me every month. Like, because I'm only buying like, this much. So like, that's why they're able to stay stable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to keep going like this. That's the problem with being a small thing.
Well, the thing is, I know that so most of the drum companies have their hardware being manufactured by one of 2 companies. So I'd probably say about 80% of the industry.
Yeah.
But their cost for import has gone just exploded. And even the raw material costs have actually raised.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to figure out, like, since they're not fluctuating their pricing right now, I'm having a difficulty understanding what that's going to look like in 2 years for instruments.
No, it's scary because, to be honest with you, like, there's the possibility that cymbals like aren't going to be able to be made from bronze anymore. Bronze is going to be as precious as diamonds or gold.
You're kidding me?
It's very much a real thing. It's very much a reality. It's very scary, but tin is in such short supply. Tin is used for like laptop batteries, electric car batteries, like things that are way more important to the world as a whole than cymbals. Like those things are going to take precedence over it. And the tin that's used for cymbals has to be elemental tin, meaning it has to be 99.99999% pure. The copper can be recycled. So that's a little bit, pretty much all of the copper in the world now is recycled, has been recycled. There's very little copper being extracted, from the earth. I mean, some, but so the tin has to be pure. That is a finite resource.
Mm-hmm.
It's a finite resource, and cymbals are not at the top of the priority list. So like, that is a huge problem, and it could potentially lead to somebody having to like just accept that cymbals are going to have to sound differently, you know. And there are studies out there of if you dig deep enough, I'm not going to tell anybody, but of people that have done studies on how do we make like church bells and other things out of things other than bell bronze and get them to resonate for as long as they do, because it is a finite resource.
So do you see at this point, have you seen in the market where they're looking for another material other than brass and bronze and copper?
I mean, I have looked for another material other than brass, bronze, and copper. It's just not feasible. Nothing sounds the same.
So like aluminum, for instance, though, you know, that has kind of really good vibration qualities to it.
It's
Why?
too soft.
Too soft. Okay.
Yeah.
So compared to a brass, is it less? Is more soft than a brass or a bronze?
Well, brass is not good for resonance. Bronze is a very specific material for cymbals and a very specific amount of copper and tin for it to be as resonant as it is.
Okay.
So it really is the mixture of copper and tin that is pretty magical for making things vibrate. Yeah. So unless we can learn to synthesize some kind of element, which I'm sure in the future will be possible.
Right.
But until then, yeah, we're headed into dark territory.
Wow.
Sure.
What concerns me, not concerns me, but what's interesting when we're going down this road, and I'm not trying to totally deviate it, but this is what's interesting to me is that we're in a point now in the history of in the history of the world where everything's about to change, and you bring in AI and bring in all those other elements. I mean, it's a whole new game.
Yeah.
What's really interesting, I had a conversation with the director of product development with Roland not long ago, and he was telling me that the increase of electronic drums, percussion, cymbals, that kind of stuff is going to be growing, and to the point where they think it's going to eclipse acoustic drums by 2 to 3 times. And he said, you know, people made that same claim about the piano and nobody believed them, but you look at the piano now, it's 10 to 1 the amount of electric pianos that are being sold to an acoustic. And I wonder if that's going to be the one trade-off going forward, that we're going to have to be using more cymbals that are triggered. Or
I don't know.
Do you think that'd be the case?
No, but I could be wrong. I mean, I to me, like, I've tried electronic percussion stuff, electronic drums, electronic cymbals. They just don't feel the same.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
Don't. It's less about, forget how it sounds. They might trigger beautiful sounds, but they don't feel right to the person playing them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a keyboard versus a piano, you can weight those keys to kind of feel sort of relatively similar, but like an electronic drum kit, an electronic plastic cymbal versus like hitting a real cymbal, like that's not even close. So I feel like there's a long way to go before that.
Yeah, I see a whole new world of teaching coming all around, because if we have to protect our bronze, our cymbals, and we have to make them last, people are gonna have to really change their techniques. I'm one of them. You know?
From smashing them on the edge.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's why like a lot of people, you know, like I'm doing like modifications, like there's so many cymbals out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these big companies, Zildjian, Sabian, Plastic, they've been just cranking out thousands of cymbals every week. I mean, where do they go?
Mm-hmm.
They're out there, man. You know, so let's repurpose them. You know, that's more of my business than making new cymbals, is taking people's existing cymbals and changing them, customizing them. Oh yeah, yeah. That's what I started doing before I developed anything on my own.
You know, I feel like I have a good pulse on things like this, you know, but
yeah,
you know, I had never heard of that before, that you could actually repurpose or remodify an existing cymbal. I hate to admit it, but yeah, it was no clue, no idea.
That's probably, I would say, my biggest contribution to the drum industry and the modern cymbal making world. Like, I wasn't the first one to come up with the idea to modify a cymbal. People had done it before, but I was the first one to bring it to the forefront, to put it on social media, to put it out there as like, hey, this is like my business model. Like, this is a real thing. That's how I feel like I changed the industry, you know. And now a lot of people have come up behind me and have not copied, but like, you know, done the same thing.
Right.
But yeah, that's very much a thing. And it's, you know, for a lot of people, it's a more economical way to get a custom handmade thing. And it's a way to recycle something that you already have money invested in too. And some people even have like an emotional investment in it. Like, hey, this was my first cymbal, you know, I don't like it anymore, but I still want to be able to play it. Can you change it? I'm like, yes.
You know, because like right now, I think that's a really cool idea. And I'm hesitant on that right now, thinking about like, man, I just spent like $600-700 on a cymbal, and it sounds like garbage. And
Yeah.
now I have to have it modified. And there's a potential risk it could be destroyed. Is there a chance it could be destroyed? Maybe I'm overthinking it.
I mean, there's always like I guess a chance, but like I mean, I've never ruined anything for anybody. You just have to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you send it to some, I guess as a consumer, do your research on who you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been doing this for 12 years. It's the focus of my life. I know what I'm doing, but it's very easy nowadays for some person to go watch a couple of YouTube videos and then start a business, put up a website, and then say, "Hey, I'm a cymbal master," and then how is a consumer going to know the difference between me and them? Like, you got to do your research, man.
Right.
But if you send it to somebody who knows what they're doing, yeah, you're safe. You're safe with me.
Yeah, that's just exciting. Do you ever is there a place for people to go to see maybe some of the cymbals that you've taken off that are a brand cymbal and you modify it?
Yeah, you can go on my YouTube channel. There's
Okay.
a bunch of videos on there. You can go on my Instagram feed. There's a bunch of videos on there, and you can see modifications before and after videos and everything like that. You can see like really what's possible. I mean, I've taken power bell rides and turned them into jazz rides, man.
Really?
Yeah,
That is cool.
it's a lot of damn work, but it's pretty fun. Yeah.
Well, just the audience right now. Normally, I do a lot of research, but I purposely, for this line of interviews that I'm doing, I specifically do not want to do the research because I want to learn more about the Craftsman. So, if you're wondering why I don't know all these things, that's why. I purposely didn't want to do that.
It's more fun this way, I think.
I love it because it's like, yes, I'm learning so much, and if I would have known that, I would have known what to ask about it.
Yeah, exactly, man, for sure, 100%.
So you know what? Since we got to move on a little bit, can you talk to me a little bit about your Cymbal Around the World project and
yeah,
specifically what the auctions are, what they benefit, and how people can do that?
Yeah, so that was something that I started during COVID. And earlier in the interview, I mentioned a guy named Craig Lauritsen, who was the first guy who had the website with any cymbal smithing information. That guy was my hero, and this was a chance that I could work with him, which was fantastic. And another guy named Dave Collingwood, who's in the UK, another fantastic independent cymbal smith, who will be at the drum show, and he's going to be coming out here to visit me. And I just thought, here's an opportunity to raise some money. A friend of mine in the industry turned me on to the Music Cares charity. They were raising money for musicians that were affected by, the shutdown, that just weren't able to go out and gig and earn any money. So I thought, man, here's a great opportunity to do an auction. So I had a blank sent to me from Turkey. I started it. I sent it to my buddy in the UK, Dave. He did some work on it, and then he sent it to Craig in Australia. He finished it up, and then Craig sent it back to me, and then we auctioned it off to a guy who happened to live in New Jersey, and we raised a good amount of money, and I intend to do it again. I just have not had the time, but I'm certainly going to do more of these. I just think the idea of it going from from Turkey to the US to the UK to Australia and back to the US is it's awesome, man.
Well, it's a one-of-a-kind instrument, completely.
I mean that, and let me tell you, dude, the video for that cymbal, it's on my YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
That thing, it sounds as good as you would hope a cymbal that had done that journey. Dude, it was awesome. I was so happy when I got it back. I was like, man, I can hear me, I can hear Dave, I can hear Craig, I can hear all the influence, I can hear the time in, it's just a phenomenal, magical cymbal. So
what's going to be really interesting too is we really got to educate us as customers. Need to educate ourselves on cymbal sounds and what makes a good cymbal sound, because there's going to be a whole new flavor of cymbals coming out with what you guys are doing, and how you can tell the difference between the Craftsman and hear their different contributions to that instrument. It's pretty remarkable, really cool. That shows that level of quality and teamship. Or teamship, is that even a word? Community.
It is now.
Okay, there we go. I'm gonna patent. I'm gonna trademark.
Invented it, bro. Let's put that in the Webster's, man.
All right. Well, I just gotta thank you so much for taking the time today. This is so incredible. I'm looking forward to your panel, your presentation at the Chicago Drum Show, and of course your booth. So if people want to learn more about you in the meantime, what can they do? Where can they go?
You can go to www.NickyMoon.com. That's my website. You can see all my current cymbal series that are available. There's a web store. You can purchase cymbals off of there. you could send me a message if you want to customize something or commission, a modification. And you can also find information on the Cymbalsmith training camps. My Instagram is updated, 2-3 times a day with, pictures of whatever I'm working on, pictures of my workshop. I'm very transparent about what I do. So that's probably the best way to keep up with me. You can contact me through there as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was exciting.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great talking with you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
All right.
This has been a production of the Drumming News Network. All rights reserved. All media is owned by the respective parties. This episode cannot be distributed or copied in any form. Please visit drummingnewsnetwork.com daily to keep up on all the latest drumming news. Copyright 2023.